Hey everyone, before we get into the podcast, we want to announce some updates with our Power Monkey courses leading into 2022. We are excited about continuing to offer our gymnastics and weightlifting combo courses, 1 and 2 day offerings. If you go to powermonkeyfitness.com, search under the events tab, you'll be able to see what we already have on the agenda for 2022. We will be expanding into kettlebell offerings as well. Those are already up on the site too. If you're looking to host one yourself, please contact us at info@powermonkeyfitness.com and we'll get one of the courses out your way if one's not already on the agenda. Come hang out with us, learn some technical expertise when it comes to weightlifting, gymnastics, and now kettlebell. Hopefully see you soon. Welcome to the Power Monkey Podcast, where we chat with the best in the world about what they do. I'm your host, Dave Durante, with my co-host, Chad Vaughn, and on today's episode, we have Mechelle Freeman. Now, many of you might not be aware of who Mechelle is, unless maybe you were a fan of USA Track and Field, but Mechelle is one of the top USA athletes in track and field over the years, turned coach. She was an NCAA champion at the University of South Carolina, and then went on to compete for Team USA in the Beijing Olympic Games in 2008 as part of the 4x100 relay team. She has now transitioned to coaching and is the relay coach for Team USA that was out in Tokyo this past summer for the 2020 Olympic Games. Her teams were the 4x100 and 4x400 teams, who both were incredible. We won't go into how they all finished because we talk about it on the podcast. Incredible stuff. We are fortunate enough to have her a little bit more involved with Power Monkey these days after having her out as a guest at Power Monkey Camp last year. Her and her husband David came out, made quite an impression on the entire team. We are a big fan of hers. We think she's an incredible coach, and we think that you guys are going to love this podcast as well. Enjoy. Well, Mechelle, it is so good to finally get you on the podcast. We've been trying to do this for a while now, and I'm glad we were able to finally make it happen. How are you doing?
I am doing well. Thanks for having me. I am glad to be in the presence of the Power Monkey crew.
Yes. And it's kind of funny how we met because Dave Newman, the owner, founder of RX Smart Gear, had suggested your husband David come to camp because what he does in his world, working for Lifetime Fitness, things like that.
And then you met his wife.
He's
the real star.
Yeah. But the funny thing is, you came to camp too. You both came, and when you showed up at camp, I was like, I know her. I recognize Mechelle from somewhere. And then it clicked that obviously you were on the 08 Olympic team. You were on the track team. We could talk about that. But then post-competitive career, you were on the AAC, which is the Athlete Advisory Council, representing track and field athletes. And I was the gymnastics representative. And I remember going to all the meetings with you. And when I saw you, I was like, that's right. We had actually been working on for the athletes for years and years together. So it was cool to be able to bring a friendly face out to camp.
I know. And I was like, when you brought that to my attention, I was like, that's where, those meetings you go and you deal with all the different NGBs, but it's only a certain few people that stick out, and you were one of them.
Yeah, and you were as well. And I just remember you being very vocal about the athletes, about making sure that we were doing everything we could to make sure, and that was the position, right? To make sure that we were there to help facilitate the concerns, the funding issues, what was going to happen with the athletes post-career. And that's something that you had such a big part in. I want to kind of touch on that a little bit. I don't know if we want to start with that, but I want to talk a little bit about just your career first so that our listeners get an understanding of who you are, because I think, a lot of our listeners come from the CrossFit setting. Maybe they're not aware of all of your incredible accolades. Can you just talk a little bit about your competitive career as an athlete and how it got you to where you are today?
Yes, I love to talk about myself. Well, I grew up in Maryland, so I'm a Prince George's County girl. I have a twin sister. We always were together doing everything, whether that was sports or trying Girl Scouts and theater or dance. The big thing that I learned from my mom was the importance of access. And my mom was always the advocate of that, making sure that we were exposed to different activities and hobbies so we can figure out who we are and what we enjoy to do. And that came in the form of sports for us. So we started out with basketball, and then the basketball coach forced us to do soccer to get us in shape. But we were undefeated because we were athletic, and the guy won the championship for soccer. And then they were like, man, those twins are fast. So, funny fact is that we grew up as the Lewis twins, but now we're the Freeman twins because we both married Freemans, like random Freemans.
Wow.
Not related.
Not related. Like, so we have the same last name still, but we were known as the fast twins really growing up. And as we, were fast in our sport, people were like, you need to run track when we got to high school. So we didn't start running track organized until ninth grade, at the end of ninth grade. And fortunately for us, we were really, really talented. So we were able to focus on it and get a full scholarship to the University of South Carolina. We were able to be a part of the 2002 national championship team at the University of South Carolina. That was the first national championship in any sport for the university.
Wow.
So that was awesome. Right. And then, I didn't think I was going to run anymore after that. I wanted to run in the Olympics. I was, very talented at the collegiate level, All-American, meaning your top 8 in your event and throughout the country. So I achieved, that level of success. It was just that you have to have the body and the mindset really of understanding how to be an Olympic or top world-class athlete. And at that time I was immature and I didn't realize that to really understand like what it even took to achieve something at that level. And I actually took 4 years away from the sport and focused on, I got my graduate degree in integrated marketing and communications. I worked at one of the top ad agencies in the world on Madison Avenue for 2 years in New York City at Y&R. And then after 4 years, I was like, I'm gonna run again. And so I quit my job in 2006 with 2 years before the Olympic Games. And 2 years later, I actually made the Olympic team in the relays. I'm a sprint specialist, so the 100 meters. I'm world championships and Pan Am Games. Over those next 2 years, I literally went from being at Y&R as an account executive to traveling the world, running for USA. I signed a deal with Nike and other sponsors. My old ad agency sponsored me. So yeah, it was awesome. It was an amazing 2 years. We were on the 2018 together. And then I retired. And at that time, the United States Olympic Committee, now the USOPC, but then they were focused on like, what do athletes do when they retire? So we were a big part of that conversation. Now it has developed and evolved to focusing on entrepreneurship, which is important, and the mentorship program and connecting those relationships. But ultimately adding value to the impact that athletes were bringing to their sport and to their experience as a person that wasn't being recognized when you transitioned to the workplace.
Yeah.
And so we were really a part of that conversation on just how to add value to what we offer as world-class athletes and representing ourselves in businesses. So being a part of that, I worked with Coca-Cola for a year. They had a program that let an athlete work in their global sports marketing department. I worked on a 2012 Olympic activation in London. I was there for a month with Coke. I had to manage the athlete relationships, the parties,
that's the good
things,
stuff.
like it was the best month ever. But since then, I went back into working and marketing, and then I decided to quit for good, and I haven't been back since 2015.
You've had like 10 lifetimes already. And there's a part of that story that I want to just touch on. One, clearly your talent level is at a point that most people just don't have, right? I mean, what you did is pretty unbelievable. All the accolades, what you did at South Carolina, but then taking 4 years off is unbelievable. What did you do during those 4 years from a physical standpoint? Because to be able to jump back in 2006 and have a 2-year window to not only make an Olympic team, but win a world championship, to win Pan American Games within a 2-year window after taking 4 years off is unheard of. I mean, that's just not possible. What was that 4-year period like for you? Aside from getting your master's and going to the workforce, did you train at all, or was it just completely taking that time off?
No, I completely took that time off. Like I know it was crazy. And I want to say like a lot of it, of course, is genetics. And being able to age, all of those things. I was 23 at the time that I took that break. And so I still had youth on my side and genetics on my side and years of athleticism, like years, growing up. So I felt like it was time that my body recovered. You know, in college, I was dealing with a lot of injuries. So I was able to have my body recover. Another thing that happened was just, you know, I went through some personal, like a bad breakup that made me like have to understand how to get through that, and being in New York City and being able to be successful, not having anyone out there and making it work. So all of the mindset things that came from that time as well was that differentiator between when I was in college and I would run slower because I was running against someone from like LSU or Florida who I knew was fast. And then I would run faster when I was running against somebody who I knew I could beat. So, you know what I mean? So now I knew how to line up, and that was the difference.
So it was a mentality change too, right? You became more mature during that time. Now jumping back in 2006, were you still in New York at that time? Where did you end up going to be able to kind of kick it back into gear again?
Yeah, so like when at that time in 2006, I was working in New York, and I was like, all right, New York. I started training, like I was working full time and then going to the track in the Bronx at like from 6 to 8. It's a public track, it's strollers, slow people who don't respect lane one rules. So it was just, you know, not ideal if you're saying you want to be one of the fastest women in the world. So I knew that, okay, if I wanted to achieve this, and some real things had to happen, and I had to hold my vision for myself, the faith that I said that I have, the excellence that I said I'm committed to, and like hold that accountable, you know, like if saying, okay, if you're faithful, then be faithful. If you say you want excellence, then go get it. And, you know, really do those things. So I'm like, all right, if I can't do it here, then you have to assess your environment. And if the people or the place that's around you is not where it can help you be what you see, then you got to change it. It's nothing, it's no ifs, ands, or buts. So I knew I had to find a coach and the training environment that would be right for me to be successful. And that's all that mattered. So I found that in North Carolina and picked up from New York, moved to North Carolina, and got the plan in motion.
Chad, what do you think about that timeline of, you know, you take 4 years off and then you jump back in within a year, you're already kind of at the world stage again, world level.
Yeah.
Chad, do you think you'd be capable of doing something like that?
Oh man, I can't even imagine that. I think maybe at that age, I mean, just because I've gone long periods at this point in my life without training, and then kind of like what Mechelle said, like you had such a background of being an athlete. When you came back in, your body had a certain extent of a memory of that, you know, and so it's the same for me. I mean, even though I'm 41 and a half years old now, I can go without doing a snatch for a year, you know, and then go back and snatch pretty well and still at a decent heavy load. Now, it's probably not a great idea to match snatch, you know, after a year of not snatching at this point since I'm 41, but definitely, I mean, now that I know what I know and I've done what I've done, I think if I would have taken 2 years or 4 years off at the age of 22 or 23 or 24, right? 24 was when I went to the 2004 Olympics, then I may have ultimately ended up lifting more weight. You know what I'm saying? Because we push so hard, and we not only physically, but we're mentally and emotionally so hard on ourselves. And it takes such a toll that I think maybe that break could have been good for me, and probably maybe not that extent of a break, but extents of breaks are probably something that any high level athlete should consider. And I certainly wish that I would have done more of, you know?
Yeah.
Now I can definitely see that being a benefit now. I mean, it's so hard when you're actually in it though, to think taking extended amounts of time off are beneficial, because you think more is better, right? I need to be in every day. I need to put in more hours. I need to make the sacrifice. You need to do all the things that other people aren't willing to do.
But that's the easy part though, like the physical, because the talent's there. The part that it makes you develop is the areas of opportunity. So like now you got to be like, all right, what can I control? And that's like the mindset of it all, and working on those areas. So now when you get back in it, the talent's there now and the mind's there. So then it moves like this.
So what was your actual goal? Was your goal to make an Olympic team?
That was literally my goal. So like when I came back, the training like just changed. Like it was 100% all in, like from the moment I woke up to the at night putting my legs up for 10 minutes before I went to sleep every night. Like every little detail, the consistency of it all was at the highest level. The level of like the technical understanding of how to run is what the difference was from college to a professional. Like, so now as a coach, I can coach that because I understand the science of it. And so if we're talking about execution, then once you understand it, then you just execute.
Right.
So if I can teach somebody how to, they can learn how to execute it, then it's not just going out there racing, you're executing. And that was the big difference that I learned. So that quick year, I came and made that world team once I knew how to run, like really how to run, and because the talent was there. And it was just that one bit put me over, in addition to that mindset of being able to line up to one of the fastest women in the world and still think you have a chance. Then that next level of my faith at the time was at a real like unshakable state.
It's incredible. And so I know it's not a subject you like to talk about, or maybe you don't like to talk about too often, but your experience at the Olympic Games, Chad and I talk about our experiences too, and what happened within at the highest level. And we talked about it before at camp. Your Olympic experience was maybe different than how you had envisioned it, right? Yeah. You were on the 4x100 relay team. You guys dropped the baton within that race, and a potential gold medal, potential podium finish went out the window. Is it something that kind of fueled you? Because we talk a lot about those setbacks being things that helped us grow into the people that we are today, and help define us as people. Do you see that as part of who you became, or do you see that as just another roadblock in terms of something you had to overcome?
Yeah, you know what? So I look at it, and so when it happened, it hurts, right? It stings, and you're angry, and you're mad, and disappointed, all that. But then I had to think about really the last 2 years and like put things in perspective. And when I had to balance it with that, then the outcome of it all was I had to accept and be content in the result. And what I mean with that is that I had come so far over those 2 years, and I really said, and I did what I wanted to do. Now, I will say, be particular with your vision. See yourself on the podium with a medal next time, because, sure, I did do what I said. I said I wanted to make an Olympic team. And with the result of it all, I'm still overly grateful for the experience of it all. And that is, higher or than the disappointment of not being an Olympic medalist. Now, last thing I will say is that it is a difference than being announced as an Olympian than as an Olympic medalist or Olympic gold medalist. So I do think about that at times.
Did you ever consider continuing after 2008? Or was that like a hard stop of 2008, I'm done, this is my 2 years and I'm done?
No, I wanted to go back to 12, and then I had this injury with my back. It was a bad disc, and I could not train the same. And I didn't want it to linger on for years and years. And I knew I had a career before just starting my running, that it was a seamlessly easy transition to get back in it. So I just started looking and to see what that would look like. And it was an opportunity for me to work at an agency in North Carolina, and I was still injured. And so I just decided to go ahead and move forward. And then the Coke opportunity happened. So I got to blend the two again.
Yeah. And I want to talk a little bit about that, because it's so fascinating, just touching on what we mentioned earlier about this transition period of being an elite athlete. And we talk a lot with CrossFit athletes too, that are kind of still in their prime, and are maybe gym owners and starting their families and trying to balance what it's like to be an elite athlete and have all these other things going on. But there's a real kind of challenge in terms of transition, right? We see that a lot with athletes of all sports. If you saw the documentary, The Weight of Gold, that came out last year too, just a lot that goes on with, as you transition from being at the peak of something into something completely different, how do you make that transition? And you seem to have done it better than most. You got your marketing degree, you had a great career, that you were able to come back to training again. But were there some things that you learned, or that you really felt like you were able to lean on in terms of really seamless transition that other athletes sometimes struggle with?
Yeah, I mean, it was still an emotional and mental process. And so I would like to say, like, what's been great about the USOPC is that they have evolved over the years to meet the demand and the structure of what the transition looks like in different areas, from like the emotional mental state, from the, your career, what do you want to do for the rest of your life state. Um, and I love that they have those resources now. I will say that my benefit was that I had a master's degree already. So I completed, it's about the completion of things outside of the sport, that when it was time to transition, I can rely in those other areas that were built up. So yeah, I had the master's degree. I had the experience those 2 years at YNR. So if I was to get a job, it wasn't like I had to start at entry level. So it was like the foundations were set up in the different areas, and not just all eggs in one basket, that gave me that way to kind of move and shake. So I do tell people that, be intentional on how you set up your ability to remain in control of your choices as best as possible. But I mean, not everything, but it can be planned, but at least set yourself up to where you can move back and forth between, your strengths and your talents and your abilities and your interests. And that's going to be key. The opportunity that allows like the athlete, I would say these unique opportunities need to be recognized. And that's what the USOP was starting to do. And what the opportunity with Coca-Cola did was created that blend, because of course I still was interested in the Olympics and athletics and sport, but at the same time, I'm interested in marketing and advertising campaigns and brands. And so how do those meet together? And it's important for organizations and companies to even recognize, which I say has started to happen, those blend of the two opportunities that now can have the athletes find places that, oh, we fit perfectly for this. And it was having that hard time of like transitioning out of sport and not being recognized for your value because you've been running for 10 years or running for 5 years and you haven't been doing anything else. Rather than understanding the value of your international travel or your mental capacity or your time, those skills and experiences, and how we added value to that. So I feel like that's definitely being recognized in the workplace now. And then the ability to be an entrepreneur and monetize your interest in what you're doing as an influencer in the social media age that we're living in now creates a different ability than what we were over 10 years ago, that I think is great for the athletes as well.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that you seem to have transitioned into this next phase, is you being an entrepreneur, but you also getting back into the coaching side of things. Did you envision yourself? I want to get into TrackGirlz. I want to get into all the things you did over this past summer and everything, but both Chad and I got into coaching. My path to coaching, I didn't anticipate ever being a coaching, and I think Chad is similar, and it kind of like fell into this passion of actually teaching what we did our whole lives. From my perspective, I had no intention of trying to get into coaching. Kind of found me, and I found this love for actually passing along this knowledge that we kind of built over decades, right? How did you find this track back into coaching? What was it? Something that you envisioned happening, or did it happen kind of on its own, kind of organically?
Yeah, we have a similar experience, because it was, I thought I wasn't going to be in coaching, and I thought I was going to be in marketing. So, and naturally, coaching is an opportunity. Of course, like you said, you have decades of education that you have been taken in. And so I originally went back to marketing and didn't have a plan to go into coaching, but I got the call and they asked me of my interest to be one of the relay coaches for the women.
For Team USA.
Yes, for the national teams. Yes. And so I was like, hello? So, I mean, in the middle of while I was at work, that sounded a lot more enticing than what I was sitting down and doing at the time. And so I was like, Definitely want to look into pursuing that. And so I did. I ended up being selected. And so I have been the USA track and field assistant relays coach for the national team since 2015.
So that happened in 2015, and that was with no prior coaching. That was just with you having been an athlete and them seeing that you maybe know how to interact with the athletes well. That was just with them thinking that you could become a good coach.
Well, no, we think it's about your, what you put out there,
Right.
So as a relay person, one thing I would say, I was a relay technician. I have been on national relay team since high school. So one thing I know how to do is run a relay. And I can exhibit that as far as like knowing how to run first leg, second leg, third leg, fourth leg. So I've always been that one on the relay that can always run any leg, make sure they can rely on me in the zones. And so very teachable, coachable, and in the same way, I've been a part of these relay teams over the years enough to exhibit how you interact socially. So I think with all that, then yeah, they were going to take a chance. They were looking for a retired Olympic or professional athlete with experience in the relays that can come in and support the head coach. And that's what they were hoping to get, like somebody to see if it could work, and it worked.
Now that leads to 2020, 2021 Olympic Games. Yeah. You are the female track relay coach, and the women kick ass. They were just superstars, right?
Yes.
The 4x100 team got silver medal. The 4x400 team got a gold medal. Yeah. But your experience with the Olympic Games was a little different than maybe you were anticipating because of COVID protocols and what happened to you. Can you touch on your experience a little bit, and then we'll talk a little bit about the outcome?
Yeah. So, I mean, going into Tokyo, of course, it was different because of the pandemic, and the head coach was credentialed to go, but I was not originally credentialed to go to Tokyo because they had to cut credentials due to the COVID protocols, and for some reasons, my credential didn't seem like it was valued. So I had to make sure that, really how to start to advocate for myself. That was when I really, over the few months leading up to, made sure that, whoever was making decisions understood that I coach the women. Okay. So I didn't, unfortunately, the head coach had to not attend 2 weeks before the Olympic Games because of a medical incident with his family. And so insert Mechelle. So 2 weeks before, I never thought that I was not going to the Olympics, by the way, as a coach. So I was already planning on what I was going to say, how I was going to coach, what process I was going to use, because I knew I only had 3 days to practice the 4x1 because COVID didn't allow us to have a relay camp. And we had to go over there with the girls never having one practice together. Wow. So, of course, the relays through the years have built a reputation for the U.S. to have some struggles. 2008, you heard my story. So, I wanted to make sure I'm going into the prelims. I definitely had some anxiety because I walked away from that moment, in a different state that I would have liked to. But dealing with that, making sure you had to come out successful with just 3 days and understanding how to coach in a situation like that. On top of COVID, I was a close contact because the guy in front of me tested positive on the flight over. And so I had to move out the village and to move into the hotel, had isolated transportation. I couldn't ride the buses or anything. And I could only go to the track, which was a blessing because I could at least still coach. So I did all of that. We ran the third fastest U.S. time in the 4x1 history for the women. And we got the gold with the dream team of Allison, Sydney, Athene, and Dalila.
That 4x400 team is like unbelievable.
Yes.
If you look at that list of 4 names, you have 2 just absolute veterans and then 2 young up and coming superstars paired together to make, I don't know if there's going to be another team of 4 like that in a long time.
That's what I mean. Like, to be a part of a moment of understanding like who is in front of us. That's what that moment was in the 4x4. Allison Felix on her last Olympic Games. But then you have the superstars of 400-meter hurdle women who just both ran 51, 5, and 4 world records. And and then you have a thing who's the young up and coming superstar.
I got to mention also, you got 2 New Jersey crew in there. You got
I know.
and Sydney, both New Jersey, and then they got Delilah from New York too. So there's a pretty strong New York, New Jersey connection to that team.
Yeah, they are holding it down. That's fair. That's fair. But yeah, I mean, just to be a part of that, and then in about 30 days, we're going to find out they have a head women's relays coach position now.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I had to officially apply for that, and so we'll find out in the next 2 weeks who that is.
That's incredible. Well, I'm sure you're at the top of the list or something like that.
Well, as long as you've been putting it out there in the universe, like you say, you're thinking in that direction.
Yes.
It's going to happen. I got to say, I've been trying to make it back to the Olympics ever since 2008 in some kind of way, not necessarily as an athlete, but as a commentator or in any form that I could. And you were able to do it in 2012 through Coke. You were able to do it now as a coach in 2020. I'm not sure if you were there in 2016 in any capacity, but I got to know, what's it like to be there and to be a part of something on the other side of it, because I long to know what that's like, what that feels like to be there, to be in the moment, to not have to be an athlete who's competing, but to be able to be there and really truly be able to take it all in from the other side. What was that like comparing as an athlete?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing of that is that you get the different makeup of the Olympic Games. So you have the athletes, you have the sponsors, and you have the people behind the scenes, like the coaches and staff and things like that, administration and stuff like that. So it was, for me, I mean, the Olympic movement, it has so much prestige, and I just wanted to still be a part of it all and still make sure that I'm a part of the conversations of a sport that this impacted my life in such the way that it has. And when it just kept coming to me from 2012 with the Coca-Cola and the marketing, I'm like, yes, like, it's a great experience. You get to see like the money conversations, Chad, which are like mind blowing. All the way. I mean, I was in meetings, and when I was at Coca-Cola, I was flying to Switzerland and having meetings with the executive board with IOC. So, I was, Mechelle from Oxon Hill, Maryland, presenting the Coca-Cola on-site activation for the Olympic Village. And, so it was like, that was extraordinary. And then coming from a coaching side, I mean, you're still involved with it at the highest level that you can be with the talent that you have, without actually running. So, I mean, overall, I think it's a great experience. I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for the opportunity. And I would say for you, like what has added value that I have personally witnessed with you and Dave is the education that you all teach. And I'll continue to show that education and be a part of those conversations. You got LA 2028 coming up in the US for the first time. World, be a part of those conversations so that you are going to be there when it's time. Like, because I already know the value is there from what I hear from you all and have experienced from it. So yeah, let other people see it.
Well, I appreciate that. And I got to ask too, because when I coach, just even at a local level or at the national level, I'm probably more nervous for the athletes that I'm helping than I am for myself. I'd rather be the athlete out there lifting. At this point, I would be less nervous. So for you being
that's the worst part. That's the worst part.
On the biggest stage, did you find yourself more nervous as an athlete in 2008 or as a coach in 2020?
Coach. So, I mean, because as the coach, you're not, you don't have, once you say bye, I mean, you walk through the tunnel and they just got to, do what you got to do. So you're always like, did I say the right thing? Did I make sure I reminded them of this? So you're always like questioning yourself, and that lack of that control of the execution part of it all is where you have the nervousness come in. So definitely more as a coach, and you want to just make sure you're making the right decisions. I mean, you have to have those hard conversations with the fifth girl of the 4x4 who was thinking,
Yeah.
wanting to run in the final, but you're telling her that you think it's 4 other girls that are better than her for this moment, for that moment, or for that opportunity at that time. So I mean, just being able to make the right decisions. I pray for discernment. I make sure that I go into something with a clear head, unbiased. Everything is about putting the best 4 performers on the track to do what we need to do for USA. And stay true to those things. And then when you have those conversations with people that question your decisions, or if you make a decision, but it was based in the right thing and rooted with the right intentions, then you have to like just go with that. You did what you could do, and you put the best effort out there, and that's what it is. But I will say I have had one disappointment as a coach where we dropped the baton, and I definitely learned from that on like going with my gut and intuition and things like that as well as a coach. That develops a lot.
Yeah. So you did a little commentating as well, right?
Well, I don't officially commentate, but I do I do love hosting. I have we do TrackGirlz conversations when we do our like interviews, and we've had different women on there from Bozeman St. John. She's the Netflix CMO. We had Miss USA Track and Field. She was a track girl at University of South Carolina. So I always host our own interviews and our own shows that we bring on other women in in our TrackGirlz community.
Now, from the track girl side of things, let's get into that, because that's the next generation, right? This is where you can make the impact on who's coming up next. You have a daughter. Yeah, I'm sure you want to see what this next generation can do in terms of being prepared to be the next great track athlete. How did TrackGirlz come about, and what is really the intention of the program?
Yeah, I mean, when I was back after retiring from sport, I was working at ad agencies, and this one agency I was working at in Atlanta, they didn't have any track and field athletes on their athlete roster. And so I was curious on why not? Yeah. And he was like, they're only relevant every 4 years, Olympic sports, blah, 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 blah. So I'm like, no, not the like dope women I know. And I was saying women in particular because I'm just thinking about my circle, but even on the men's side, it's just that the reason I relate to a track girl, because it was a natural and organic community that existed. When I was 14, it was like, there go to TrackGirlz. If you look up the hashtag TrackGirlz. So it wasn't anything that I made up or created. I just wanted to breathe the life into it and make it a tangible brand. And so I started thinking from like a marketing and a branding standpoint on how I can add value to the TrackGirlz name and to the TrackGirlz and create a brand around it, where people can start to acknowledge again the value. It's always been a value conversation. And I feel like when it's time to like stand for something. But yeah, now it went from transition and conversations there to, okay, well, how do we add value to the women of the sport and the consistency of the everyday runners? It's over 30 million runners, everyday runners, and track and field doesn't translate to that community. And so I was even thinking about, how can I impact that? So yeah, I trademarked TrackGirlz. And then I started to, put some energy behind 3 areas. One was the storytelling, how we can tell the stories, have a platform that's really giving content into the backside of their lives, them as an influencer, the impact, how they have impacted sport and culture, dealt with racism, sexism, Title IX, before, after, having conversations now about the transgender, around transgender athletes and intersex athletes, how everything has evolved over the years. How can we tell these stories? Also, the second way was workshops. If we can like showcase the talent that exists between the athletes, the coaches, on the administration side, and use them as mentors and really share their tools and help girls understand how to perform and have access to those things, then that's showing them as a value. And then lastly, on the track and field aspect, if we can give girls access to track and field is the highest participatory sport for middle and high school girls. It's one of the most diverse sports for girls, body types, race, skill sets. You can run, jump, or throw. But it just gives you an opportunity that I felt like it changed my life. And I want the girls to have this opportunity to change their life. So I wanted to have those workshops, those tangible experiences. And then lastly is our grant program. Our grant program that actually gives dollars or product equipment to girls to have direct access to track and field in their local communities. So we're giving money for a girl to purchase a racing wheelchair to have accessibility to track and field as an athlete who's unable to walk, or girls to pay for their travel to participate in AAU and get uniforms or shoes. So those are our main areas. You know, the idea is just to use that as a change agent in girls in those adolescent years as they go through social, physical, and mental development, and give them the highest level. Give them access to high level quality information. And that's what TrackGirlz does. So I'm really proud of that.
You should be. It's an incredible program, and I think it just it fits in really well with the reasons behind why Chad and I are so passionate about trying to bring weightlifting and gymnastics to the world too, and to the people that didn't grow up with it or don't have access or think that gymnastics and weightlifting may be interesting only 2 weeks every 4 years. The same thing that
Right.
One of your colleagues mentioned to you, and how we can make our niche sports something that people can get excited about throughout the rest of the year. Now, you're working with Next Generation, and one of the things that really stood out to me when we were talking about this earlier, and you transitioning, taking that time off, was how mentally strong you were, and to be able to say, okay, I need to be here physically, but the mental aspect of it is something that is not something that is inherently easy.
Right.
You seem to have a really strong mental game. Is that something that you work on with the girls that you teach with TrackGirlz as well? Is it something that's part of the program? How do you envision the mental side of becoming an athlete a part of that program?
Yeah. Okay. So TrackGirlz we have a curriculum, and I put a lot of that process of me quitting my job and making that Olympic team into teaching how to put work in to get outcomes. Like with something you see for yourself, something you believe for yourself, how you do, and then how you become. And so I give a process that they learn about that. We talk about authenticity, how you have the ability and the power to stand up for what you believe in and represent who you are. And then you can value your strengths and recognize your strengths instead of looking at certain things that interest you or skill sets is not important when it could change the world. And track and field, is a good space for that, because you have so many different women through the years that have stood up, like Wyoming Tyus back in the 60s, who stood up for racism. And then you have someone, thinking about FloJo, who came in and changed the fashion game, and, how you represented feminism and athleticism. And so you have these different eras through the years of track and field having that impact. And we talk about that through authenticity. And then we go to something like vision and talk about goal setting and seeing yourself in these places. But now with vision, now you got to go to something like where you talk about excellence. You can't get excellence without consistency. So that's when we talk about, like when I moved to North Carolina and those daily habits change, you're all in, leveling up, everything is there every single day. You're doing it, you're committed. And then from there, that's when you're able to show up at the line and have poise. Because now you're like, everything I do every day, I know what I do every day. So I know the results that's about to happen. So you're able to keep your composure and like stand next to the person that may be the fastest woman in the world and still perform your best. And then from there, it's little tidbits in there about how to control the controllables. Of course, I got injured. I didn't run for 4 months Olympic year. I didn't run from September of 07 to January of 08 with an IT band injury. And so during that time, it was like, oh, you say faith is something important about you, then how faithful are you? What are the extra things you're going to do when you can't run? And that's when you had to like focus on other things, come up with new ways to run, like going in the water, deep ways, how you being creative, but you're still making it happen. But you talk about that process, you talk about, ending it on your legacy. What do you want to leave to help change and create systems and pathways for others to continue to tell the story that you tell? And I do that for the girls that we work with, and I do that for as a speaker and as someone that just want to help people understand how to perform, like mentally and physically. Like mentally, I'm talking about performance just by like getting your result. And, if I can teach somebody just how to, a method or a strategy to achieve that, then you can apply that to your everyday function.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think that's one of the big takeaways here is, it's not just about being an athlete. It's how you live your life. And all of these things kind of translate to one another. You can become a better, a marketer because you're a better athlete and vice versa. And you take those same tools and strengths and you apply them to all the other things that you're doing on a daily basis. And really what that can allow you to do is just become more streamlined with how you approach your daily life. Say, okay, I'm a great athlete, but this is going to allow me to transition to what's next.
Right.
So I love this idea of how we can take the mental side of it, how strong mentally you are, and put that into creating stronger next generation of athletes. But I want to talk a little bit about the technical side, because being a good track athlete is a lot of technique as well. We learn about technique on the aerobic side with Chris Hinshaw when he comes to camp, and he teaches a lot about running technique. And if you've met Chris, you've worked with him a little bit, but the technique on the anaerobic side is maybe slightly different and something that I think you really lean into quite a bit.
Yeah.
Too much. What are some of the biggest technical mistakes that you see from like an average runner make when they're out there on the track, when you're, trying to get them out of lane one?
I know, right? Oh my gosh. Oh, this excites me because I'm about to start, really putting out programming on not just speed training, but just anaerobic conditioning, and just understanding how people can literally just understand how to move and just to use athleticism like functionally every single day, a better athlete, a better like movement for your daily movement, just every day. But so when I see people run, they just don't know how to apply force. Like they just move their legs and it's just their feet coming down. And I just want to be like, you gotta push, get your knees up to push down. Because if you're not lifting up enough, you're not, pushing down enough. And they don't know how to use their hips. And so like, I would say the biggest thing is if I can correct someone to go from an anterior tilt and know really how to position their hips, then once you change that position, then they can know how to apply the force easier.
All right. I need a visual on this. Can you explain that a little bit? So, all right. So the reason why is because gymnasts are notoriously terrible runners. Like we run from the end of one runway to the vault, like 75 feet around that length. And that's about it. We got kicked out of the gym one time when I was in college, and we had to go train in other sports for a couple of weeks. And we went to train with the Stanford track coach, and he watched us run and he wouldn't even coach us. He's like, just go back to the gym. You're embarrassing everyone else around us that are actually running on this track. So leave the track. So notoriously terrible. But I'm curious exactly what you mean by anterior tilt and application of this force.
Okay. Yeah. So, the pelvis, right? So the pelvis is in that position of that sway back. So women usually like walk with the sway back. You got the belly poked out, or you got the little arch in your back, and you got the little switch. So it's like the cute feminism sway back. But then, when you're not trying to be cute and you need to be a little bit more functional and have correct movements and angles, you need to squeeze your butt cheeks and get your pelvis, and so your hips come under you, and so it's stacked. And so you don't have that sway back. And now the power is really in your hips on how you apply force. Like everything is coming from your hips. So now you put your body in a position to where you can use the most power in your hips to apply the force down to the ground and use that energy to cover more ground each step.
That sounds like a hollow position. That sounds like
it's a hollow position. It is
thing, and it's something that
run that way.
Yeah, and it's something that maybe gymnasts do have the ability to run well.
That's what I'm saying. And then once you have that ability to have the hip strength to keep the position, because that's where it gets tricky.
Yeah,
like the sustainability of it all. Then I can teach you how to be fast.
I don't know about that. Just not fall on my face, but it sounds that idea of being stacked. It's something we talk about a ton in gymnastics world. It's something Chad talks a lot about in terms of just positioning with the barbell as well. Chad, would you say that position is similar to what you're trying to get people to do in their lower back as well?
Yeah, I was hoping that she was going to say the same thing, because up to this point, basically every sport or athletic movement that I've heard any expert from any field talk about, they indicate this stacked position, so to speak, or this position with the body that's more effective, that's more powerful. And essentially, if you have a big arch in your back, it sounds like in any movement, in any sport, you're basically turning off a part of your body. You're not going to be as effective or as efficient as you could be. But I'm definitely interested in Mechelle teaching me how to run faster. I love I
what I
love
would do
trying
is
to
I
be
would teach
fast.
you how to accelerate properly. And
That's
see,
where the weightlifters come about, that power that coming out of the blocks.
yes, exactly. If you can teach somebody how to accelerate, then they can apply that athletically across, anything.
Right.
But then but so once you learn that angle, then you learn how to apply force. You can accelerate appropriately, cover more ground each step, and boom, then that's out. You'll be faster.
I love it. I love it. I'm seriously very intrigued. I'm interested I hope you put out more information, because I'm very interested to learn more about that, just for movement purposes, just to learn more, so I can make more comparisons about weightlifting with other sports and other activities and everything else. But one of the things that I'm always interested in is, like, there's this big comparison in the weightlifting world with powerlifting versus Olympic lifting, or bodybuilding versus Olympic lifting, or bodybuilding versus powerlifting. So would you say that sprinting is to long distance running as weightlifting is to powerlifting? Would you say that that's comparable in that way?
Okay, let me make sure I'm speaking the same language. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So with Olympic lifts, you're talking about the explosiveness and how we are able to train, like Olympic lifts for sprinters. We want to use that because that's going to translate the explosiveness, the power, the acceleration point, and things like that. When you're talking about fast twitch versus slow twitch, then the distance community, they're not going to be doing as much ballistic, Olympic weightlifting, things like that. They'll do some weightlifting to have that foundational strength of it all, and have the mobility and the stability of your joints and things like that. So when you say weightlifting to, what was the other one you said?
Powerlifting.
Powerlifting. Yeah. Then if you're saying powerlifting, I want to make sure I'm comparing that to the Olympic lifts.
Yeah. So powerlifting in just bench, squat, and deadlift. Slower movements. Yeah.
So foundational, so our max strength movement. So we use that, like as a sprinter, we're doing that for sure in acceleration. So those are our three main core movements: is our deadlift, our squat, and our bench. Like that's going to be our foundational strength that we use. And then we use the Olympic lifts to do that explosiveness. You're not going to see a long distance person. They'll do bench and they'll do that, but I don't think I'll compare it the same, because I feel like a slow twitch is a whole nother program outside of the two.
Well, that too, and just also in terms of how different are they really? How much? So, for example, would you say that the technique, running technique, is different for long distance versus sprinting as fast as you possibly can? And how closely should they be grouped together? For example, if we say weightlifting, under barbell movements, yes, we can put powerlifting and Olympic lifting together, but in reality, they need to be separated because they are really two completely different sports. So when you say runners, are you okay with, and does it make sense to really put a marathon runner in the same category, in the exact same category as a 100-meter sprinter?
Oh, yeah. No, because again, you're talking about the big difference is how much force you're applying. Like as a sprinter, you got to develop the weight, the capacity to handle the force application, and the build your elastic energy and things like that. That for fast twitch execution, you're going to have more time in those areas. If you're talking about long distance running, then you don't need that same elasticity in each movement as you to develop in time. That's more of, you'll have that foundational strength, like you were saying, in those power lifts, but generally it doesn't go beyond that for when you compare a slow twitch development to a fast twitch development as the focus in the weightlifting.
Right. last question on this is, who has better running technique, you or Chris Henshaw?
Well, it all depends if we're doing anaerobic stuff. When
Right.
it starts to cross over to aerobic, then mine goes downhill.
But you did use some of his techniques to do your hood to coast, right?
So
the
let me
pacing
tell
work.
you, yes, I had to run for the first time in my life over 3 miles. And the last time I ran 3 miles was literally over 15 years ago. So this past year, it was a challenge when I got off the van and they told me I had to run 15 miles in 24 hours. And what I remembered was Chris Henshaw's advice on the breathing rhythm, over time, because I was like, okay, one thing I know about is rhythm. That can definitely translate over, whether you're running, sprinting or long distance. It's just about what rhythm you're using. So I was like, okay, if I can just, apply the rhythm and keep the breathing, then that will control my aerobic, out capacity. And so I was like, all right, let me start out. Well, he said, if you want to start out with 6, type 5, wherever you are. But for me, where you can manage it, and then you can keep track objectively on, how you're keeping your pace. And so I use that because, again, I'm an executor. So if you give me a system, then I will follow it. And it worked. So I averaged about 10-minute miles. The highest one was 11 minutes, but over the 15 miles. So that was the best I had after coming off the couch. That was a true couch 15 mile, like for real.
Wow, I don't ever want to even think about doing that. But talking about being an executor, especially at this point in your life, I have to ask you this question as well, because I compete on the master's level. Any thoughts of competing on the master's stage in track?
Never.
Why not?
Never. Because to put that's a lot of, that's competing. Like to train at that level, it's just, I got 2 kids, I got jobs, my wife, I can't, like, to add the training regimen of it all. It's just more like,
it is tough to give into a different level. I will give you that for sure. And it's definitely a different type of training than I used to do before. But I think I've got such a better mindset and handle on how to train and how to get the most out of my body that it's advantageous in that way, though I can't train as often or as much. And I feel like someone like you at the talent level you're at, you could minimally train and probably go break masters world records.
No, I thought about that. I mean, I could train and do great at master. Not saying it like that, but I'm saying it's a good probability is what I'm saying. I have a good outcome, like in my head, that's possible. But yeah, it literally comes down to time. Like and priorities. Like, am I trying to be still an athlete or do some other things? And so it just came down to I chose other things.
There you go.
I wanted to ask you something. Chad was making the comparison between powerlifting and Olympic weightlifting and bodybuilding when we were talking about anaerobic versus aerobic. But where do you think race walking falls into that?
Oh my gosh, we just had this conversation. So I just got back from USA Track and Field's annual meeting, and the race walkers definitely feel they are like inserted in not the easiest ways in our sport. Like it's just tracking, it's like run, jump, throw, not in race walk. And it's like, and then the US is not like really known for the race walk programs and things like that. So we were just having a conversation of where does race walk fit in for track and field in general. But I thought about that because I was like, could I go out and do, attempt a race walk and make a team possibly? But so to answer that, I have no idea on what it like. I have never tried. I think it's something that I will have to do. But I mean, you're really talking about like hip mobility, and that's aerobic for sure. And I couldn't imagine, like, I would say from a weight program, that's just, dealing with the health of your muscle. Like, I mean, but not really like developing the strength of it all. But
I appreciate the answer. I'm just fascinated by it because I watch it during the Olympics, and I'm just fascinated by that sport, being that I have almost no idea what's going on when I watch it.
It's what Dave wants to compete in on the master's level. That's why he's asking.
I'm trying. My hip
I was gonna say,
mobility.
Dave, we literally just had this conversation with the race walk. There, we need a man. Like they don't have any
There
men
you go,
that
Dave.
make the Olympic teams and
Might have
race
to-
walk.
You know, the Italians are pretty good at race walking, and I might have it in the blood.
I could literally see you getting it, Dave. You got it in you, man. I can just looking at you, I can tell right now.
Yeah, you already had a
that's something we
mobility
can
there.
consider. We are trying to get Mechelle out to camp to help out with the stations, to help be one of our instructors. We're hoping that it can happen sooner rather than later, and maybe can teach me some tips when we get out there. But some last minute questions before we jump off the podcast. The first one, Chad, no idea where we're going to go on this one, but
no idea. I'm hopeful. I'm putting it out in the universe.
Possibility. What sport or discipline do you prefer, weightlifting or gymnastics?
Oh man. Okay. I mean, I love you both. But I'm gonna have to go with gymnastics.
Whoa.
Oh.
Yeah.
But you're so fast. What about without weightlifting? Well, you probably would be fast anyway if you.
But the elasticity of my body is gymnastic. Whatever,
I needed that one.
You needed one. It's been a while.
He's got like the last like 8 in a row, and that's.
Whoa!
Thank you
I like weightlifting though. I need to actually lift weights right now. But yeah.
There you go.
All right, question number 2. Anyone that you think would be great for us to have on the podcast?
Ooh, let's see. I'm trying to think outside of my sport because I sound biased.
Not at all. We don't have many people from track and field world on, so if you find someone that might fit, it'd be great.
Okay. Well, let me think. Oh, well, it's this. Yeah, I'll put you on. You want somebody that can help on the education side?
Anything you think might be a good interview.
All right, I'll think about it. I don't know.
Anybody that will say weightlifting is better than gymnastics. How about that? That is a criteria.
Well, we are going to try to have your husband David on, so he might be.
Oh, you should have had them together.
We wanted to have them separate so we could get stories from both of you guys separately.
Okay. But I'm actually glad that I came because, like I told you, he told me we're going to some camp called Power or something. Monkey. I saw Monkey a couple times. And I was like, I don't know what this is, where we're going, but he was like, we're going to be in the woods. And I was like,
he made it sound very appealing, huh?
Yes. And I was like, I don't know, but I'm just happy I came because it turned out to be fantastic. The people, the community, the education, you have a great thing going on. So keep it up.
Thank you. We got to get you more involved with it.
Yes, I definitely got to get involved as you all move forward.
I had no idea that you had no idea what you were stepping into. You just kind of blended right in, and you were awesome. You both were awesome.
Well, I didn't know we had to actually do the workshop. Like he's like, we're showing up to all the classes, and I was like, what? So
well, I will say that most guests do not really do what you and David did. They sometimes jump into a station here and there, and they participate. You both were in everything. You went to every station. You went to every campfire story. You went to every lecture. You participated in everything. And not only do I appreciate that, and we all appreciate you putting forth that kind of effort, but I think it also gives you a better appreciation for what the week is really about when you do that kind of a thing.
Oh, yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like, you got to understand the system.
Yeah.
So, you know what I mean? Like, that you have to. So yeah, me to really get and David's big in that. He is so committed to going all in and getting the best experience possible. So he's gonna be we gotta show up for this. We gotta show up. So trust me, that was more David. But
very much.
Yeah, so I appreciate my husband for that.
Yeah. Well, Mechelle, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast today. It's been way too long. I can't even remember. What was that, like a year and a half ago or a year?
It was already,
yeah, it's been way too long. And it was awesome to, get to know someone that, I think we'll all have a special relationship with, even if we don't know each other very well, because we were on the Olympic team together. You know, that when we all come together, you know, Cheryl was there as well, who was also there in 2008, and Lindsay was on 2008 as well. And for us to all be there together and just connect immediately on that one big event that we were all part of and didn't even realize we were all really part of it at the same time. So it was incredible to get to know you in that way. And I also appreciate you guys being a part of all of the stations and Campfire Stories for sure. And you did an incredible job at the Olympic night. And I was bummed that because you were supposed to come last time, right?
Yeah.
So I had it all planned out, had perfect questions to ask you. And so I'll save them for when you're there next time. But
next time.
Yeah. But thank you again for coming on. Anything you got coming up you want folks to know about? Where can we keep up with you?
Yeah, follow me on Instagram at Mechelle. That's M-E, like Mechelle, and Lewis Freeman. And, you know, I'm about to launch in January my anaerobic performance run club. So we're going to do some speed and anaerobic capacity education and programs, and actually start having some street races in 2022. Yeah, so look out for that. I'm going to start a street race circuit where we can start integrating with some of these road races and those longer distances, having conversations around diversity and inclusion in the running community, and then running fast on these streets instead of signing up for 5Ks and 10K.
I love that. Hey, if you have master's level there, I might jump into that as well.
It's for everybody. It's for everybody. Like, you're going to do it too, Dave. Yeah, Jordan, we're going to all do 100, 4x4. We're going to do it on the street.
All right.
So you're literally talking about sprinting 100 meters on the street.
Yeah, like I started. Like I started beating these boys in these streets when I was like 8, 10, 12, that's how we're going to make it happen. So yes, we're going to have adults, kids, men, women. You get to run out there. We're going to make 100 meters in the streets, 200s, relays. Yeah, shorter distances.
Awesome.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, keep up the great work. You're doing so many incredible things, and it's a pleasure for us to know you, and hopefully we can continue working together in the future on anything that you can think of or we can think of. But to our listeners out there, as always, we very much appreciate you guys listening in. Be sure to head over to powermonkeyfitness.com for services and upcoming events. Also check out our Instagram pages for regular teaching and technical content at Power Monkey Fitness, at Dave Durante, and at Ollie Chad. And on behalf of Power Monkey Fitness, we're your host. I'm Chad Vaughn with Dave Durante. And until next time, guys, thank you all for listening.